Welcome to Trust Issue by Demo, the podcast where we go beyond checkbox compliance and get real about security. In every episode, we will break down what's happening in the world of CMMC, cybersecurity, and GRC, straight from the people building, auditing, and living it. Real conversation about real security.
Hello, welcome back to Trust Issues.
It is suspended doesn't mean cybersecurity is, okay? CMMC Phase 2 is suspended, cybersecurity is not. You still have to continue. And what I did was to explain to them that the Department of War, though suspended the Phase 2 rollout, but it doesn't mean that the NIST 171 has gone away or the DFARS clause 7012 that people have in their contract has gone to sleep, right? They still have that obligation. Okay, they have obligation to protect CUI. They have obligation to protect CUI at all costs. You will be amazed at organizations that are very big, okay, not medium size, okay, that do not even have any cybersecurity regulatory. They do not certify to any cybersecurity compliance framework. I've worked with a $10 billion company who is not certified to any cybersecurity, and their cybersecurity initiatives are just baseline. So when I worked with the organization, I was also shocked. In fact, there was no form of information security policy in place. So your statement of, okay, an organization who does not pass level 1 must not even be. So that particular organization had to put in some measures in place, see the gap assessment of, okay, what do we need to meet the minimum baseline? So the minimum baseline I recommended was CMMC level 1. The suspension, we also give rights to a high potential false claim. Organizations will be highly exposed to the False Claim Act. For most of them will relax and report inaccurate compliance representation. So the audit requirement may have changed, but the security requirement definitely has not changed. I've seen clients who restrict employees from using AI completely. And I've also seen clients who just, okay, we just allow people to use whatever kind of AI they choose to use. Then there is also a third class of clients that have specific license. Now, say they have Copilot license for all their users. But the question is, do you think all your employees actually use Copilot? They focus on using the Copilot? They use other type of AI, right? So executive miss it where they're trying to restrict employees from using AI. What I generally advise them is, what AI governance do you have in place? And then with CMMC level 1, they found it very difficult to even implement some of the technical controls, like taking away the local admin. Everybody had local admin. Exactly.
At a $10 billion company?
So it also depends on the kind of business that the organization is into. You do realize that security is not an IT problem, okay? Security is the executive problem, and security is a top-down approach, right? So even if the head of IT says, I need budget to implement this, I need budget to buy these technical tools so we can implement, I need to hire a resource, okay? And the executive says no.
Yeah. You can have the most perfect implementation of the technical side and fail within 15 minutes of your assessment starting because you don't have the processes to prove that you are controlling access. One of the things that companies need to understand is it's the SSP that's getting assessed. The system security plan is what's getting assessed. If you're doing it, that's awesome. But you got to show me, you got to demonstrate in words how. Now, one thing that people don't understand is the word periodically. DOD in one of their FAQs defined periodically as no less than annual. And a lot of companies I saw, and this was a template SSP provided by a FedRAMP approved, FedRAMP ready company, provided a template to their clients that had the requirement for periodically reviewing everything as monthly. I can pretty much guarantee you anyone that's using that template probably didn't do that, isn't doing that. And if their assessors are on the ball and know what they're doing, they're going to fail.
It's almost like you're telling like your wife that you're committed to going to the gym every day. And you're like, well, you don't have to go every day. Like, no, I'm going to go every day. Like, okay, well, I'm going to hold you to it now. And if you don't, you're going to fail. Let's start off with once a week, once a month.
If you failed, that failure gets reported to SPRS, and DOD will see that you failed. If you have the plan and DOD looks at your and says, okay, you've done a self-assessment and you have a plan, but then you fail, self-assessment and a plan with a fail as a whole is not going to get you something. Hire somebody that knows what they're doing. That's it. The company that hired me last year had an internal IT manager who said, yeah, I've read in this 800-171, I can do this. I can get us ready. And obviously didn't.
So fast forward to 2018, they go out and they're like, all right, how are they doing? Well, that clause said you have to have a system security plan. You have to have a plan of action and milestones to close out the requirements that you don't currently meet, but we're not going to say you got to have it all done day one. So what they found was companies had gone out to the ones that even tried to meet the letter of the law. They still gamed it because they went out to the internet and they downloaded a system security plan that had a line that said, insert company name here. So, it had no bearing on their actual system. And they had plans of actions and milestones for all 110 requirements that the DIPCAC saw some that they weren't going to close any until 2099, right? Would be dead by the time that they would do anything. So didn't particularly help protect our data. Wait a minute. As a taxpayer, you should be pissed, right? Because the data and information that these people are able to garner and steal because we don't have good cyber hygiene is the data and information that took millions of billions of dollars of innovation and development to put together, right? Like the F-35. How much money did we spend to be able to design that aircraft to do what we need it to do, right? And I remember that this is how old I am, right? I worked at NavAir when they had the problem with the thing couldn't take off of the carrier because the wings were too heavy. Right? So they had to go redesign it to make sure that it could do that. So that's billions of dollars that we as taxpayers spent to develop this premier aircraft that was able to be replicated. Now, some of the systems that are on there are classified, so they didn't get all that information, but they damn sure got the same body, right? So the amount that they had to put into development was this much as opposed to this much, right? And so, there are people like, well, we just need to manufacture faster and make more and we'll win. Well, two things, right? We had to come up with the money to develop it. Now they don't. So the money that they would have spent to develop, they can now apply to manufacturing, and they outmaneuver us and can manufacture faster because they already didn't have to spend that upfront money. And they used to have CAD/CAM people go in and dissect statements of work and the tech data packages to only give those companies what they need, right? We need to get back to where we only give a company what they need to do their job, right? I think Katie's, I've told this story a million times. I'm sure people are like, seriously, again? But she went out to Transcom, and there was a guy who was a welder, and he was like, hey, I want to talk to this woman, right? Because he's like, I'm a welder. I don't need no stinking cybersecurity. I just need my acetylene torch, and I'm good to go. And she said, it was interesting because she went out there and they made sure she had her safety glasses, steel-toed boots, all that stuff. All her OSHA requirements were met, right? And so she said to the guy, she said, well, how do you know what to weld? And he says, oh, they send it to me. And he had a laptop sitting up on the side of the thing. And she said she could see his Facebook Instant Messenger and his Amazon delivery notifications, right? And he had a CAD program. And she said, hey, can you zoom out on it so I can see what that was? It was the entire structural design of the F-22. And she said to him, you think our adversaries might want to get a copy of that? And he's like, well, I guess. Or even more nefarious, what if they get in and they change the tolerances on the welds that you were sent, right? And now you have low confidence and we don't use you anymore. So they've eroded my industrial base because now I have one less participant in good standing, right? Secretary Shanahan at that point in time was like, we've got to validate that these companies are protecting our data. They're doing what they've signed up to. And so that's when the Protecting Critical Technologies Task Force stood up and the Defense Acquisition started looking into, okay, what can we do to validate that these companies are actually doing what they're supposed to? So that's when a lady by the name of Vicki Machete and a group of other people came together and developed the DoD scoring methodology for these 110 requirements. So we could go out and do an assessment and say, okay, how many of the 110 do you actually meet? That was another funny story. You had companies that they said, okay, you go into the supplier performance risk system and you put in your evaluation of yourself, right? And they said 110. And then the DIBCAC said, okay, we're going to come look at you. And all of a sudden that score went to a negative 200. And then the DIBCAC was like, now we really want to come talk to you because what changed? Were you lying up front? Were you just gaming the system and telling us what we wanted to hear? So what happened was they started talking about how are we going to do this? What are we going to look at? That's when they said, okay, we need to develop this DCMA Defense Industrial Base Cyber Assessment Center. So that's what stood that up, was this whole recognition from that IG report and the cyber readiness review that these people weren't doing what they were supposed to. And they were kind of gaming the system. The thing that is also worrisome with this current conflict that we're in, we've been told by CISA, they're in our water, they're in our infrastructure, they're hitting us every day. And I talked to the guys up at DC3 and I'm like, are you getting an influx, an increase in your reporting about incidents? No. Is that because they're not hitting the defense industrial base? Or they don't even know, right? Because a lot of times what you hear is they don't know until the FBI knocks on their door and says, oh, by the way, you were hacked a couple weeks ago, right? And the sad part is, right, when people ask me about it, this is the roll before the crawl, before the walk, before the run, right? I mean, this is just the very nascent stages. And where CMMC will go now, hopefully we'll be able to prove out automation and it'll be the easy button because, a lot of these companies, they know mechanical engineering, they know how to make their bolt, but they don't understand IT. They're waiting for their nephew to come home from college to fix that laptop over there. It's doing something funky. I mean, we see that. We're hoping that we can move the nation further ahead and, zero trust theoretically is where we've got to get to. What was Katie always refers to the phenomenon in the movie, right? The bunnies are in the farm, right? People are already in our networks. They're already monitoring what we're doing. And I think the thing that frustrates me that I don't understand what message needs to get out there. What's it going to take for us as a nation to sit up and say, hey, this is serious, right? They've already messed with our gas with the Columbia pipeline thing. They've already been in our water. They've already been in our electrical. And it's got to be like something catastrophic for it's got to be a month.
That is another episode of Trust Issue. In this conversation, help you think differently about compliance, security, or trust. Share it to help someone who is still stuck in a checkbox mode. Each week, we will keep bringing you more episodes, resources, and real-world insight from the BMO team. Wherever you are listening from, don't forget to rate the podcast and follow us to stay up to date on the latest development in the GRC space. Remember, compliance gets you certified, but real security, that earns trust. Thank you for listening.